Hey, my guest on this segment of the Town Hall is Sheila Ray. She's the CFO of our bank and the Chief Operating Officer of our holding company. And Sheila, thanks for being with us on the Town Hall broadcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
This is our second segment, and we talked about the challenges on our last segment of having a live broadcast. But I want to pick up in this session where we left off with the last session. That was Tom looked the camera in the eye and with great passion talked about the year of the cat, and he challenged us all to not just listen and talk with each other, but actually take action on the things that help us gain on making the client the center of our universe. What are some of the watershed moments in your career when you realized that the client really is king and it changed your perspective to be more client focused?
I think for me, it first came into focus when I was in Gainesville, Georgia, earlier in my career at the First National Bank of Gainesville. And we were a rapidly growing company that had to go through a lot of changes, just like we have here at State Bank. We strengthened our credit practices. We chose to go through a significant systems conversion, and we launched in a series of efficiency projects. After all of that, we realized we had become rather inwardly focused. We had been concentrating on how we do things a lot. So our executive team went out together on a retreat and spent some time thinking about what we wanted to do with our strategy, where we wanted to be, what kind of organization we wanted to be. And as a result, I was fortunate enough to be on the team that was selected to craft a vision statement for that company. And I will never forget the first line of that vision statement is that the client is our lifeblood. We found that we had fallen away from what was really our first love. It was our client. And that without our client, we really would not succeed. And we regrouped in that, and it made a significant difference to me.
So you listened, you created the vision statement, but naturally, and particularly with the increased operational role that you have now, there's the coordination of a plan around the things that affect real action. Mm-hmm. How long did it take where you felt that you were really making progress on that initiative?
We started making progress very quickly. It really comes down to doing big things and little things. Yeah. When you start an initiative like we're doing here at State Bank, sometimes you're going to move into pretty heavy things like the North Star project. Then other times you're going to do smaller things that are important to just your group. You know, everything we do in operations and IT affects our external clients. It affects their view of the bank, and it affects their view of their own personal banker. Our clients have entrusted their worldly treasure to us. So we have to maintain our focus and be diligent to make sure that everything we send them, everything we do, creates the impression and the confidence that we want our clients to have in us. And our internal interactions have to be grounded in that same, in the same approach and the same discipline that we want with our external clients. Because if we don't have that same interaction internally that we want externally, we will never succeed in the strategic intent of creating a premier client experience.
Yeah. In our segment with CEO Tom Wiley, we said that there's a distinct difference between client experience and customer service. Mm-hmm. And that client experience really is about all the touch points with the company, right? So that if somebody is face-to-face with a client-facing associate in a branch somewhere or sitting with a relationship manager, whoever that person needs to support them is part of the equation that's a solution for the client that's sitting there, right? So it begins with us working with each other as a team, with the client at the center of our universe, not one or the other. And naturally, there's action that needs to be created around all of that. So do you feel, or what can we do to help people internally feel that when that phone rings, or that email basket is full, or a call comes in, or a request comes from the website, that is as important as somebody sitting in front of you in a branch?
You know, I think it just comes down to maintaining that focus of knowing that I am ultimately interacting with the external client. And that external client is, you know, seeing me through the banker that is across the desk from them. Or they're seeing me through the letter that I just sent to them. Or they're seeing me through the notice that I just crafted the verbiage for. And always have in your mind who that external client is, and picture them, and who their persona is, and how you want them to feel about every interaction, and what you want them to think of when they think of the State Bank brand.
So let's talk about employee engagement, because naturally there is action that has to happen, and engaging our clients, listening to our clients, taking action from what we learned from our clients. We did a bunch of employee surveys over several years, but really in the last couple of years we started stepping up our focus on recognizing them as being the eyes and ears of the face of State Bank. When our client is facing them, they're facing a brand. So we listened more intently. We created action plans. We've done many different things that are visible and some not quite as visible, but let's talk about engagement. We're going to put up some images while you're talking, but let's talk about some of the buckets of concern and some of the feedback that we got from people in those surveys, because engagement really is the key to good client experience management. It's also about employee experience, right?
That's right, and we gauge 4 key benchmarks when we look at our survey, and we did pretty well on those again. One is, are you proud to be an employee at State Bank? And I think overall we score pretty well on that. What is your total job satisfaction? That's one of our benchmarks, and we score well on that. Do you prefer State Bank to other banks? Once again, we score well on that.
Working at State Bank.
That's right, working at State Bank. And then lastly, but very importantly, can you accomplish your personal career goals at State Bank? And what we found is that our associates across the board feel very positively in those 4 key benchmarks. But as you know, because you helped conduct the survey and certainly spent a lot of time dissecting it and looking at it, we found some areas we could improve on as well. One of them is continuing to work on our communications, our employee manager relations. You've made a lot of progress this year, for which I'm grateful, in working with our teams to help them understand each other better, how they think, how they make decisions. You've worked through the HBDI evaluations with teams of people to help them understand each other better, and then you've also conducted training, specifically working with some of the leaders and supervisors of our company to help them improve their interaction with their employees and with other people across the company. So I think both of those have helped us to move down the spectrum in something, or move up the spectrum in something that we have consistently heard that is important to employees, and I think that's probably true at every company. Yeah. That communications and employee manager relations needs a focus.
So what was the third bucket?
Well, there was another bucket having to do with compensation and benefits. When we look at that, we did some research, and one of our core values is actually internal fairness in compensation and external competitiveness. And you and Tommy Zielinski, I know, have spent a lot of time looking at expanding in our benchmarks for gathering this data, both in what we pay and in the other benefits that we provide. And what we found is that overall, I think we're pretty good at this, but we have some areas we can continue to tweak. And we're going to do that, and we're going to continue to make progress and look and make sure we stay competitive and meet that core value.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting how these are so interrelated too, because a lot about grades and ranges and compensation and benefits is also about communication. That's where right. We have done a lot of research, and there will be a lot more information to follow on tweaking benefits and explaining grades and ranges and making them more transparent, and making sure that we're, for instance, publishing a range and a grade on an open position to encourage the upward mobility of people in the bank. But it is funny how they're all related. They're also related to the fourth bucket.
Yeah, the core values. I was just thinking that same thing, because one of our core values has to do with compensation, as we said, and our culture and core values. I think what you found in the survey is that most people are certainly aware of the core values. We talk a lot about core values here. They're certainly on our website. Unfortunately, we had some feedback that maybe we don't live those every day. And I think we all know day to day that there are values we have that we sometimes stumble on, and we are committed to doing better on living those every day.
And the fifth one, of course, is training, and we've talked about that, how we need to make some progress in technical training in 2018 and really advance the whole initiative, not just the not just the skill, but the client servicing standards and the way we communicate with each other for the client to be at the center of our universe, the client experience management, all of that does come down to training. But it also comes down to an uncommon common sense, the client experience management. And how would you want to be treated when you walk into the bank today? Mm-hmm. So let's talk financials. Kind of a sweet spot for you. It's been a good year for banks, bank stocks in particular, and State Bank. I mean, at this broadcast, our stock price is up almost 30% this year. Our market cap has never been higher. We recently traded at a 52-week high. Why?
Well, you know, I wish I could say that it's great investor relations or that it was a wonderful strategy, but in truth, I think that our bank has benefited, as has much of the industry, with a rising optimism that there will be deregulation that will help people in our industry, or companies in our industry, and also that we'll benefit from a tax cut, which will go to our bottom line. Banks pay some of the highest tax rates consistently in the nation, and so that would immediately impact our bottom line. So we've kind of been on the wave, but in order to ride the wave, you have to be there to catch the wave. And so I will say this, we had our board, we caught the wave, and not every bank has experienced the same benefit that we have. Back in November of last year, when right immediately after the election, the market started increasing, and we did not increase quite as much as the market did in general. However, since that time, we've pretty much tracked the indices and have performed pretty well. So you can sit back, and I think everybody has their feelings on equity markets. Many people feel that they're irrational. There are economists that say that they are rational no matter what you feel, or whether you feel they're overblown and it's in a bubble. What I think you can look at when you look at State Bank is that we have had a great history of earnings. We have, I think, a great future of earnings, and we have real value to back our stock price. I think that we can have some confidence in there. Now, will that maintain the stock price when the rest of the market falls? I don't know, but I think our price will certainly be supported by good earnings.
And I hear you saying that a rising tide raises all ships, right? But your fundamentals have to be sound going forward, because you're not just going to invest in industry, you invest in a stock.
That's right.
You invest in a company. So let me show the viewers a financial summary for the first 3 quarters of 2017. Can you walk us through it a bit and point out some of the more major accomplishments and where we've had some modest gains and where we might have some challenges ahead?
Sure. This is a summary that we use in our investor slide, and this particular one comes from our third quarter results when we announced our earnings. And the thing that is really kind of exciting about this, I think, there's a few things. One is that our net income, if you compare us to 2016 third quarter with 2017's third quarter, increased almost $2 million year over year for the quarter. That's great. And I think a lot of that is the effect of some of our successful integration of acquisitions. Mm-hmm. If you look at our interest income on loans, they increased 8.8% year over year for that same quarter comparison. What that alludes to is the benefit of the MBG and the S-Bank integration. Additionally, we had some good organic growth since the third quarter of 2016. And then we lastly benefited from some great rising rates that Chairman Yellen at the Federal Reserve Board helped us with. And we are grateful for that. We have been positioned for rising rates, and this is an indication of that strategy. And I'm grateful that we're positioned the way we are. The other thing I would point out that's kind of interesting about this is that while our revenue, when you exclude accretion, which is income that comes from some of the purchase credit impaired loans that we've acquired in the past, mm-hmm. When you exclude that, our revenues went up 16% year over year, but our non-interest expense only went up 11%. Mm-hmm. So that's a great thing. We brought in new people, we brought in new staff, we've added lines of business, but our revenue is outpacing the growth in expenses, and that's critical for us. Lastly, the other thing I would point out on this, just from a quick synopsis, is that our assets from the end of the third quarter 2016 to the end of the third quarter 2017 have increased 42%. That's pretty amazing. And that is obviously the result of the successful integration of not only NBG&S Bank, but also Alistar that came on board on the last day of the third quarter. And I think that establishes a level of asset growth that Joe Evans has referenced through the years of being the size of the company that would really support our expense base and the necessary compliance and risk components that you have to be a bank of significance. So I think we've hit that benchmark, and now we are going to continue to see, I think, strong earnings growth.
Okay. So where are we tracking year to date on what we've actually experienced in the first 9 months of the year to what we expected to experience this point in the year?
We are tracking a little ahead of what we thought we were going to experience in net income. That is due to a lot of the benefits that we've already talked about of higher levels of loans, the integration of the banks. We are tracking a little behind where we thought we would be on loan growth. And that, I think, is an indication of what the markets are bringing us and our risk practices and our desire to maintain a diversified portfolio.
But efficiency, let's talk a little bit about the competitive benchmarks in the banks like us, say for instance in the Southeast, an asset size around $5 billion. Is our cost of doing business higher than some other banks in that peer group?
It depends on the peer group and which metrics you look at. If you look at our efficiency ratio, we do compare very favorably to other banks. And the efficiency ratio actually considers all revenues. If you look solely at isolated at non-interest expense, then our non-interest expense truthfully look a little high, particularly given that we normally look at that as a percentage of assets. We have some lines of business that generate revenues but don't generate assets, like the mortgage group, the payroll division, the SBA group certainly generates a lot of revenue but a lesser amount of assets. As a result, we like to look at the statistic that I call the burden ratio, and the burden ratio, it nets out the non-interest income provided by those lines of business. For that, we are tracking against a goal to improve our process, our efficiency processes to get to at least a 2% burden, or down to a 2% burden. We're almost there, and we'll be there, I think, with this Alistar conversion and merging in, and we'll have achieved that goal and set a new goal. So our expenses are getting a little more in line. The other thing I think that's going to help us in that regard is our client experience initiative. We've done a lot of research, and as you read about companies that have done a similar type of client experience initiative, what you find is that there is a return on investment in this. You become more efficient. You gain more clients, and you certainly do more business because you've made it pleasant to do business, yourself pleasant to do business with. But you also become just more efficient. And across the company, I think all of our employees can help with this. If we look at how we deliver to the client, look from the inside back, or from the outside back into the company. So you're going from the outside in. And if you look at how we do that and how we can do it most efficiently but most satisfying to the client, typically you're going to find you're going to save some steps and you're going to simplify and streamline things. Sometimes those evaluations are going to lead to big projects, like I mentioned the North Star project earlier. And other times it's just going to be a small fix that affects mostly your department. But those things are really important. At State Bank, we want to be the bank that when we see a penny on the ground, we pick it up. And that's the culture that will make us hit our efficiency marks.
So let's bring this home with something a little bit softer, but very, very important. There are some people watching out here who are very, very proud right now that I'm sitting with an executive officer of this bank who is a woman. And it's a challenge that we have. It's why we have a Diversity and Inclusion Council, and it's why we want to manage the upward mobility of people in this company. But there are, I remember you were an invited guest at our Diversity and Inclusion Council meeting earlier this year, and it was an incredibly inspirational talk for some of the young professional women that were in that room. What are some of the things that you've accomplished a great deal in your career. What are some of the things that have helped shape you into who you are that you might offer as advice to the young professional women who yearn for leadership and significance in a bank?
I think first I would say be willing to speak up, be confident, and be willing to take a risk by accepting some additional responsibility. Seize the opportunity when it's presented and take a leadership role. Secondly, I would say, be careful who you work with. State Bank values diversity. We value women in leadership roles. We value people of any background, ethnic group, race. Not everyone does, and life's too short. I would disassociate from anyone that does not want you there. Life, you can move on. There are other opportunities. So be careful who you work with. And then lastly, I would say get your priorities straight. Within your family, determine what's important for your family and what trade-offs you're willing to make. And then after your family agrees to that, then you move forward. And you can maybe feel more confident and comfortable accepting those additional leadership roles.
Well, and I've got to say, from the board down, you have really been the torchbearer of diversity and inclusion in the company. And having women excel is not the only initiative in diversity and inclusion, and it's why we have organized, and it's why we've been keeping a scorecard for longer than we've had to measure the upward mobility of folks in our company, and I appreciate that opportunity. What message do you want folks, in this segment? We just covered a lot of different topics. What do you want folks to walk away with from your message to them today?
We have a great company because we have a great team of bankers. As we are going to continue to grow, we need to deliver the best service that we possibly can because our clients and our bankers on the front line deserve nothing less than that. By delivering the level of service that I know we can as a team, we are going to provide a value. Quality service doesn't mean giving things away. It means providing the value that your client deserves. And I know that our team of bankers can make that work for us, and that'll go straight to our bottom line, but it'll also make us feel better about our company and better about the work we do.
So I'm going to say what I said in the last segment. The downside of a broadcasted town hall is you can't stand up and ask a question right now. But I'm going to challenge each one of you, don't let your questions go unanswered. If you have a question, here's the email address for Sheila. Here's my email address. Or talk to your XO. But don't let your questions go unanswered. It's difficult to extend this conversation, this discussion throughout the entire state of Georgia. But we did not want these town halls to be undone given the challenge that we have in an online broadcast, but we'll figure that part out. In the meantime, talk to us. We'll listen, we'll take action. Thank you very much. Until the next segment, be well.